Archery is all about consistency. The information provided in this video series is not the only way of doing things, but it has proven successful for me and many other archers. Bow Only's mission is to give you information so that you can be the best shooter that you strive to be. Hey guys, my name is Josh Pflasterer with Bow Only Outdoors, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about what is back tension, how to cure target panic for good, and how to take your shooting to the next level. So first off, what is back tension? Okay, I hear this term tossed around all the time, yet there's kind of a big misconception about what back tension is. Okay, back tension is a process used to fire a release to fire your bow, essentially. It's not a type of release, but there are certain types of release that are easier to shoot with back tension than others. Okay. So essentially what back tension is engaging those bigger muscles in your back to slowly pull through the shot and execute that shot and achieve a surprise release. Yes, a surprise release. That is the key part of shooting with back tension, is achieving the surprise release. So why do we want a surprise release? If you're like me and you learned how to shoot by commanding the trigger on your wrist strap after you were sent out the door at your local archery shop, you probably have some form of target panic in one way or another. Okay, for most people that I come across, it's usually that they are bringing their pin up to the target and slamming that trigger as soon as that pin gets close. You know, they can come down from the top, they could come up from the bottom, they can come from the side. You know, for some people, it's a lot worse than others. For some people, they hold just on the bottom side and they slowly bring it up and boom, punch the trigger right into the middle. And a lot of people shoot really well like that, but you get in some of those pressured situations, especially hunting, or if you're in a tournament, maybe shooting for some money, it doesn't usually work out so well for you. So with the surprise release, you eliminate a lot of the anxiety within your shot. It allows you to hold that pin and let it float right over the very, very top of your target without you flinching, jerking, or forcing that bow to fire right at that very moment. It allows you to be comfortable with that pin floating over the top of that bullseye until the shot breaks. Shooting with a surprise shot eliminates the need for timing the release. Like I said, there's a lot of people out there that can shoot the release really well by timing it as soon as that pin hits the middle of their target, but for most people, you're going to shoot a lot better learning how to shoot with back tension and shooting with the surprise release. So what about hunting with the surprise release? Often this is the #1 concern guys have when I say that they should probably learn how to shoot with back tension. I get this a lot because there's a lot of people that say, well man, if that buck comes through and I only have a couple seconds to shoot him, you know, I want to be able to punch that trigger and fire that shot off and get it in there. I always say that you can get it to fire within a second as long as you learn how to shoot it properly and still achieve a 100% surprise shot. In my mind, if I've only got 1 second to shoot, I probably shouldn't be taking that shot at a live animal anyway. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a time where you don't really remember between the time that you drew your bow back and the time that you fired at a live animal? Almost like a blur. You don't really remember how your sights lined up, where your pins were. You know you hit the animal, but you're not 100% sure exactly where you hit. Before I truly learned to shoot with back tension, I was in the same boat. I mean, don't get me wrong, I knew when I made a good shot, but when I didn't, it's almost like I don't even remember what happened. It's as if I was just so caught up in the moment that I wasn't even paying attention. I mean, you have all that adrenaline going through you, and you're focused on all these different things. You're not thinking about, okay, like, you know, don't punch the trigger.
Wrong.
Every single animal I killed last season with my bow, I used a resistance release, ultimately shooting it with a surprise release for every single animal. And I'm here to say, I have never ever made better shots on animals than I have last season. Now as a bow hunter, I like my shots to be 10 to 15 yards from the tree, like right there beneath me. I want to get as close to my game as possible. but I want to have the confidence to make the shot no matter how far they are. Obviously, there's certain ethical limits. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but you have to be prepared and have the confidence to make that shot no matter how far you're shooting at a live animal. If it's 5 yards or 50 yards, you need to have the confidence to know where that arrow is going to hit before you even fire your bow. If you don't have any problems commanding the shot now and shoot as good as you want to for hunting and target purposes, then don't change. But if you want to get better and eliminate the anxiety in your shot, here's what you need to do. First off, if you've been shooting your old release command style or punching the trigger for a fair amount of time, the first thing you're going to need to do is switch up your release. You will continue to go back into your old bad habits too easily if you try to learn this on the same release that you've commanded the shot with over and over and over again. It's not impossible, but it just makes it twice as hard, because instead of just learning one new habit, you have to unlearn the habit that you've practiced for potentially years or all of your shooting life and completely learn a new habit on the same platform, which is the same release. If you've shot a wrist strap, I would encourage you to go to some kind of handheld release, such as a resistance, a thumb button, or a hinge. If you have only shot a thumb button but commanded it, I would urge you to try a resistance release, a hinge release, or a proper wrist strap release. If you've shot a hinge but didn't learn it quite correctly, or if you're still twisting the hinge off to command and fire the shot on demand, then I would strongly, strongly encourage you to get a resistance release. If you really want to learn it right, the easiest way is to learn on a true resistance release. Unfortunately, as a kid growing up and learning to shoot archery, I didn't have a coach, and there really wasn't the information out there on how to shoot back tension like there is today. Because of that, I learned how to shoot all three, a wrist strap, a thumb button, and a hinge, incorrectly. I was commanding all of the shots on every single type of release. I would punch a wrist strap and a thumb release, and I would completely twist off my hinge, forcing the shot and commanding the shot, just like I had always done ever since I was a little tiny kid. Now, I understood the process, and I knew I needed to get a surprise release, and I would get a surprise release, 50% of the time, and I would shoot pretty good. And then I would command the release, right? But the arrow would still hit in the middle. And so it'd be like, oh, well, I'll just, I'll keep commanding the release. And for those first 5 shots, it was awesome, because I could hold that pin right in the very middle, and I could tell the bow I want it to go off right now, shoot, hit the middle, and then pretty soon you start holding off the target again, right? Your pins aren't floating in the middle anymore. You're holding low, you're holding to the side, whatever the case may be, and you start bringing the pin back up towards the target and punching that trigger to get it to go off. I just kept going back into my old habits because I never really learned on a process how to shoot the correct way. Like I said, initially when I commanded the release, I didn't really see it as a problem because the arrows still hit in the middle. Since the arrows were still hitting in the middle, I was given positive reinforcement for doing a negative shot. And if I continued to do that for those 5 shots or so, then I went right back into my old habits, holding the pin off the target, bringing it to it, and punching the trigger. With the resistance release, it doesn't work that way. A resistance release fires off of the true pulling tension, so there's really no commanding or punching the shot. If you do command the shot with the resistance release, meaning you'd have to really yank it to get it to go off, your arrow is not going to hit the middle, which gives you negative reinforcement for a bad shot, which is exactly what you want. It'll help you learn quicker. A tension release has a safety. You press down and hold the safety to draw the bow back, and once you come into anchor and you start to look through your peep, you slowly let your thumb off of the safety, and you slowly build that pressure until poof, fires that release and fires your bow. With the release set properly, you will slowly build pressure by keeping your bow arm stiff like a 2x4 and slow and steadily bringing that release arm elbow straight back while engaging your back muscles. This will cause a surprise shot and a surprise release. It will be uncomfortable and nerve-wracking at first, but you have to learn the process. This is not something you can just take to a 20-yard target and start shooting. You have to learn the process, and I'm going to show you the steps on how to learn it. Before you jump into this, you must know that this is a commitment to learn. You are essentially retraining yourself on how to shoot a bow. You don't want to go back and forth between your old release and your new release, and you don't want to jump into aiming and shooting at a target too quickly. It's a process, and you have to follow the process for the results to work. This is a commitment, and the longer you spend on learning the process, the better shot you're going to be. Rush through the process, and that is what you'll get. You'll still shoot okay, but you'll fall back into old habits, especially when you're shooting under pressure. First things first, learn the release without a bow. Make a string with a loop big enough to put over your bow hand and a loop that you can connect your release to, and add knots to your string to get it to your correct draw length. Add another knot. Draw length is critical to be able to shoot back tension well with any release, but it's especially important when shooting a resistance release. Too short of a draw length and the release will fire prematurely most often or quickly, but the pin will be really herky-jerky back and forth really fast. Too long on the other hand, and you'll hold pretty steady at first, the pin will move really slow, but then you'll just feel like you're pulling as hard as you can, you're pulling your guts out, and you start to shake and tremble, and you're still not getting the release to fire because you're at the end of your pulling position. With the string set up with your draw length, I encourage you to learn how the release works over several days, firing the release with a consistent surprise shot without forcing the shot or yanking the release to get it to fire. The purpose of this is to learn the surprise shot before we even pick up our bow. When we are doing it right, the string should shoot off of our hand all the way straight forward right onto the ground. If your bow shoulder is high or is creeping throughout the shot, you'll notice that muscle on your shoulder starts to become sore as you shoot. Work on keeping that bow shoulder down so that it's in a straight line and you've got bone-to-bone contact from your wrist, your elbow, to your bow shoulder, all the way across to your rear shoulder. This will make your bow hold steadier and make your execution a lot more consistent and easier. After we learn a release on the string, we can finally learn it on a bow. I encourage you to take your sight off for this part or cover up your pins and sight housing with something like painter's tape or masking tape, as we don't want to start aiming quite yet. This will rush us through the process and will keep us from learning to shoot correctly. Shooting without a sight is referred to as blank bailing. At a target sitting at shoulder height and only a few feet away, shoot arrows with the proper surprise release execution through the bow. The purpose of this is to retrain the brain and the muscle memory process on how the shot execution should be for shooting a compound bow with release. Make sure the target is shoulder height so you aren't angled down when learning how to shoot it. If you're doing this at home, take a target, put it on a chair that's maybe sitting on a table. That target has to be at shoulder or eye level. We can't be angling down towards the target and we can't be shooting up towards the target. It has to be level with us. If you've been shooting for a long time by commanding the trigger, you're going to want to spend a lot of time blank bailing, as it'll take a lot longer to retrain your brain on how to shoot. If you're a relatively new shooter, this process will not take as long for you because you don't have the bad habits already established in your shot process. I encourage you to shoot 30 of your very best blank bail shots a day for at least 7 days. It doesn't have to be consecutive days, but you cannot go back to your old release or move to shooting at a target too quickly. You have to follow the process, and I recommend at least 7 days of blank bail shooting. Our focus here is on execution and learning the proper execution, the surprise release. We want to get to the point where we are so bored thinking about it that it almost becomes completely subconscious. We don't have to put conscious effort into achieving it, but we still achieve a 100% surprise release. We want our timing to be consistent. Although this isn't a timed or a triggered release, we want to at least be consistent in our shooting. For most people, from the time they draw the bow back and anchor and aim to the time that the bow goes off, it's usually right around 7 seconds. Now you're not thinking to yourself 1, 2, 3, right? Because you're going to hit 7 seconds, you're going to want to jerk the release. Okay, so instead, think to yourself, pull, 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 pull as you slowly, slowly, slowly build pressure in that release and in those back muscles until the shot breaks and fires into the target. If we jerk the release here to get it to fire,
wrong.
Go back to the string and practice, practice, practice on that string until it's 100% all surprise releases. It shouldn't be boom, I want it to shoot, jerk, pull, make it fire. It should be a let off the safety and slowly pull right through that shot, just thinking that that elbow is coming straight back until boom, the release fires. Remember, the surprise release is key. We only want to practice our very best shots. I'd rather shoot only 10 perfect shots than shoot 90 good shots and maybe 1 or 2 bad shots. By good shot versus bad shot, I'm talking about good shot or great shot being complete surprise release, bad shot being I jerked the release, I made the bow fire when I wanted to. Blank bail for more than 7 days if you feel like you need it. Like I said, when you think you've got it, you should be so extremely bored and sick and tired of shooting your bow because you've got it down that well. The longer that you do this, the better you will learn this and the better shot you will become. Once you feel like you have the release down and you've blank bailed 30 arrows a day for at least 7 different days, the biggest mistake people make is instantly jumping to try to shoot a target at 20 yards. Don't do that, and here's why. We now have to relearn how to aim at a target while activating our release. We have to learn that it is okay to let that pin float over the top of the middle of that target without commanding the shot and forcing the bow to fire and go off. We have to train our brain that we can consciously focus on the target and look through our blurry pin right in the very middle of where we want to hit while subconsciously executing our release and achieving that surprise shot. Put your sight back on and follow the next steps closely. Here's what you need to do. Get a big target and hang it at shoulder height, just about 5 feet away. You can use a paper plate with about a 3-inch black center filled in on it if you need to. Before you draw, visualize your shot. Think, okay, I'm gonna stare right in the very middle of my target, draw my bow back, look through my blurry pins, and think to myself, pull, 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 until boom, surprise release, and the release goes off. Take your first shot and see what happens. At first, there is a lot that you are consciously thinking about. All of a sudden, the release becomes much, much heavier and it gets a lot harder to get to fire than it did when you were blank bailing when you weren't focused on aiming at a target. This is because our focus shifted from execution to now aiming. We are retraining ourselves that it's okay to let that pin float in the middle of the target while we can execute a surprise release without forcing or commanding that shot to go off right when that pin hits the middle. Was your execution still a surprise? If so, great. Grab your arrow and shoot it again, 1 arrow at a time. If you hit low the first time, adjust your sight down because we want to train ourselves that when our pin is in the middle and we get that surprise release, we want that arrow to hit the middle because that's positive reinforcement for us that we are making a good shot. If your shot felt very, very slow, that's normal to start. Either get closer to your target or hang a bigger target up on your target face. If you jerk the release and force the bow to go off, you need to go back to blank bailing. You need to continue to blank bail until it is so mind-numbingly boring that you almost can't even stand it anymore. But that's the purpose. We want it to be so boring that it becomes completely subconscious in our minds so we can focus almost all of our conscious energy on what we want to hit. Once you can do it, shoot 30 arrows, 1 arrow at a time from only a few feet away. Adjust your sight down so that you are hitting the very middle of the target to give you positive reinforcement for making those good shots. We want to allow our pins to become blurry and float over top of what we're aiming at as we execute a good surprise release. If you can get through to this part, you are on the road to success. Just don't shortcut it. The next time that you go to shoot, start with 10 blank bail shots. You don't have to take your sight off for this. Just don't aim at the target. Focus on the execution to begin with. Hang a target at shoulder height, again, this time being a much smaller target. Depending upon how good you want to be, we want to train ourselves to aim very precisely as we execute a surprise release. At the same distance as shooting before, at only a few feet away, shoot 30 arrows, 1 arrow at a time, into the target. Adjust your sights if you're hitting high or low, and we want that arrow to hit the very middle of where we're aiming. If you have a bad shot, go back to blank bailing. Then move on to aiming at a target and start with the big target and slowly progress into a smaller target. We are retraining our brain and our muscle memory, and it takes time. Don't skip and don't rush if you want to be the best that you've ever been. Don't be afraid to let down. If the shot feels off or wrong, or if you're holding too long, hit the safety and let down and restart your shot. It takes a lot of control to be able to let down from a shot. Again, we only want to practice our very best shots. So if we are forcing through a shot and we know it's going to be bad, we're practicing bad shots. In hunting situations and sometimes in tournament situations, we need to know how to fight through and get through those tough shots when we need it to fire, but we don't want to practice those bad shots consistently. If all 30 shots were 100% surprise shots, then move 2 steps back the next day or push your target 2 steps further downrange. Be sure to start your shooting with at least 10 blank bail shots to get the feel for the release, then start aiming at the target at whatever distance you're at. Basically, we're going to move back 2 steps every shooting session, meaning every day you come and shoot, from 3 yards to 5 yards to 7 yards to 9 yards, all the way back to 20 yards. We want to slowly work back to 20 yards. The slower that we can do it, and the longer that we can drag it out, and the more precise that we can be, the better shots we're going to be. Focus on consistency and accuracy. If you get to a distance where you're having some trouble and maybe the shots are taking longer to fire than normal, or maybe you're not making quite as good of shots, move up, get a little bit closer, relearn at that closer distance, then transition back even slower, maybe 1 step back instead of 2. I know it can be tempting to skip right ahead and go to 20 yards, but trust me, the longer and slower you step back to 20, the more precise you'll learn how to aim and the better shot you'll become. If you still have problems forcing the release, spend more time aiming up close at a target and move back very, very slowly. It takes a lot of time and it's a big commitment, but I promise you it'll be worth it. If you have problems transitioning from blank bailing to shooting at a target, start even closer to your target or start with a bigger target so that every single one of your pins and your whole sight housing sits inside of what you're aiming at. This way you can still execute the shot without focusing on holding the pin dead steady as you pull through the release. If the urge to punch and command the release is still there, go back to blank bailing and redo the walk back process. You can't skip on the walk back process or you will jerk and trigger the release under pressure. Don't ask me how I know that. Do not go back to your old release unless you're going to learn how to shoot it with a surprise execution 100% of the time. You can get back into old habits which can transition into your new consistent shooting form. You don't want that. So which resistance release do you go with? The Carter Evo and the Silverback are okay, but the Stands, in my opinion, are the best resistance releases on the market. The Carters actually require a spring adjustment to change the tension of the release, and I've actually had to send mine in multiple times because the safety wasn't working as I drew back, and the pressure to get the release to fire increased without me even making an adjustment. I'm not saying all Carter resistance releases are bad, but here's why I recommend the Stands. The Stands, on the other hand, are extremely consistent releases for me, And to adjust the tension of them, all you've got to do is rotate that screw clockwise or counterclockwise to increase the tension or decrease the tension of the release. There's no springs in the release that you have to change. Everything's internal, and you can make both of these releases. This is the Perfex thumb resistance, and this is the stand element. Both these releases you can adjust all the way down so it's extremely light to get it to fire, or you can adjust it up so that it takes a lot of pressure to get it to break. I like the adjustability of the Perfex thumb resistance because you can add a 3-finger, a 4-finger, and change the angle of it, as well as move that thumb peg position here. Another thing I really like about the stand releases is the trainer lock system. I know it sounds silly, but I can take this pin and I can put it in the release, and basically when I get up in my tree stand, I can hold down the safety, draw back, angle down to where I'm expecting a deer to be at 10, 15, 20 yards, and I can pull through that release and I'll just hear a click. It will not fire, but I'll know how hard I have to pull or how much preload I need to get that release to fire when that deer comes in. No matter how long you've been shooting a compound bow, you owe it to yourself to learn how to shoot the correct way, and these releases will help you do it. If you want to support me and Bow Only Outdoors, I have these releases linked in the description below, and if you purchase through these links, it doesn't cost anything extra to you, but it helps me continue to make these videos and helps me help you to become a better archer. And if you commit to this process, hands down, you will come out a better shooter in the field, on the range, and while hunting this fall. If you recently purchased a new release and you want to learn how to shoot it with back tension, I will link completed videos below for every style of release and how to shoot it properly with back tension. Thank you for watching. If you still have questions, feel free to message us at Bow Only Outdoors on our Instagram or Facebook, as well as our contact option on our website at bowonlyoutdoors.com. Thanks for watching.